When my husband told his friends I was too old for him, I smiled instead of crying. It wasn't the kind of smile that comes from happiness. It was the kind of smile that hides the pain deep inside so no one else can see how broken you feel. That moment has never left me. The words were simple, just 5 little words, too old for him. But they cut through me in a way that no knife ever could. I remember standing there, just a few feet away, pretending I didn't hear. My hands were shaking, but I held them together tightly. My eyes wanted to fill with tears, but I blinked and forced myself to keep them dry. I told myself, don't let them see you cry. Not here, not now. It wasn't the first time my husband had said something hurtful, but it was the first time he said it so openly, in front of others. His friends laughed. They thought it was a joke. They didn't know that behind the joke was a truth he wanted to share with them, but not with me. I stood there, my heart breaking quietly, wondering, when did I become too old for the man I gave my youth to? Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Julia. I was born in a small town where everyone knew each other. Life was simple there. Quiet mornings, children playing in the streets, neighbors sharing food across fences. My childhood wasn't rich in money, but it was rich in love. I grew up believing in family, in loyalty, in standing by the people you love no matter what. That's how my parents lived. That's how my grandparents lived. To me, love was always about patience and sacrifice. I met my husband, Ethan, when I was just 24 years old. He was handsome, confident, full of energy. He had a way of making everyone laugh. When he walked into a room, people noticed him. And when he noticed me, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. We met at a friend's wedding. I still remember the music playing, the soft lights, the sound of glasses clinking. I wasn't dressed in anything fancy, just a simple blue dress that my mother had helped me choose. But Ethan walked straight up to me, smiled, and said, "You look like the only person here who's real." Those words stayed with me. I wasn't the prettiest girl in the room. I wasn't the one in the brightest dress or the one dancing the loudest. But to him, I was real. And in that moment, that felt like the most beautiful compliment anyone could ever give me. Our love grew quickly. Within months, we were inseparable. We talked for hours about everything, our dreams, our fears, our plans for the future. He told me he wanted to build a life of adventure. I told him I wanted a home full of warmth and children's laughter. Somehow, we believed we could have both. When we married, I thought it was the beginning of forever. I wore a white dress my mother stitched by hand. Ethan looked at me with eyes so full of love that I thought nothing could ever change. The vows we exchanged weren't just words to me. They were promises written on my soul. The early years were beautiful. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. We laughed through the hard times. We dreamed together. We built a home. Not a grand one, but a warm one. A place where love was supposed to live. But as years passed, life became more complicated. Bills, responsibilities, careers, and somewhere between all of that, the sparkle in Ethan's eyes began to fade when he looked at me. We had one son, Daniel. He was the light of my life. From the moment I held him, I knew my purpose was to give him a safe, loving childhood. I wanted him to grow up never doubting his mother's love. I spent my days cooking, cleaning, and caring for him. I made sure Ethan had his meals ready, his clothes washed, his home in order. I believed that was what a good wife did. That was what love meant, giving even when you were tired, smiling even when you were hurting. For a while, he seemed grateful. He would come home from work and kiss my forehead. He would play with Daniel and tell me I was the heart of the family. But slowly, those words stopped. The forehead kisses turned into quick nods. The laughter with Daniel turned into him being glued to his phone. I told myself it was just stress. Work had taken a lot of his time. Men carried burdens differently, I thought, so I tried harder. I cooked his favorite meals. I dressed up more often. I tried to talk to him, to remind him of the love we once shared. But his eyes, they started wandering, not always to someone else, but to the life he thought he was missing, to the youth he thought was slipping away. And in his eyes, I became a reminder of time passing. There were little comments at first. Maybe you should try a new hairstyle. Don't you think you've gained a little bit of weight? You used to laugh more before. They didn't mean them kindly. They weren't suggestions. They were small arrows aimed quietly at my self-worth. Each one stung, but I told myself to be strong. I thought, every marriage has ups and downs. This is just our down. I held on to hope, because that's what I knew how to do. But hope can be heavy when you're carrying it alone. Then came that night. We were at a gathering with his colleagues. The room was full of chatter, glasses clinking, the smell of wine and roasted meat filling the air. I stood beside him, smiling politely, listening as he laughed with his friends. And then I heard it. "He's too old for me." He laughed as though it were a harmless joke. His friends chuckled. Some looked at me with pity. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. My smile remained, but inside I felt myself breaking. That was the moment I realized something. The man I had loved for years, the man I had given my youth and my loyalty to, no longer saw me as his partner. He saw me as his burden, his mistake, his too old. And that was the night I quietly decided that things could not remain the same. After that night, I carried his words with me like an invisible stone in my chest. Too old for him. I replayed it in my mind again and again. At first, I told myself it was just a joke, a slip of the tongue, something he didn't really mean. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized those words weren't an accident. They were a confession. I looked at myself in the mirror the next morning. My face had lines it didn't have when we first met. My hair wasn't as dark as it used to be. My body had changed after giving birth to our son. I whispered to myself, maybe he's right. Maybe I am too old. But then I shook my head. I reminded myself, I gave him my youth. I gave him my strength. I built his home. I raised his child. If love only lasts as long as beauty, then it was never love at all. Our home no longer felt like a home. It felt like a place where two strangers lived under the same roof. We ate meals in silence. His eyes were always on his phone or on the TV or somewhere far away that I couldn't reach. I tried to talk to him. "Ethan," I said one night while setting down dinner, "do you ever think about us? About how we used to be?" He didn't even look up. "Julia, don't start. I'm tired." That was the answer I got most nights. I'm tired. Tired of me? Tired of life with me? Daniel noticed too. Children always do. One evening, while doing his homework, he asked, "Mom, why doesn't Dad laugh with you anymore?" I froze. My throat tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing his hair back. "Your dad has a lot on his mind, but don't you worry. He loves us." I smiled at my son, but inside, I wasn't sure if those words were true anymore. It wasn't just what Ethan said that hurt me. It was what he didn't say. He stopped noticing me. He stopped asking how my day was. He stopped thanking me for the laundry I cooked, the laundry I folded, the life I held together. Worse, I began to notice how his attention lingered on other women. At restaurants, his eyes followed the waitress a little too long.
At the gym, he talked about the young trainer with admiration that he never gave me anymore. One evening, while clearing the living room, I found his laptop open. A message flashed across the screen. It wasn't a full conversation, just one line from him to someone else. "You make me feel young again." My hands trembled as I read it. My heart pounded so loudly I thought I might faint. I closed the laptop slowly, quietly, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But in that moment, I knew. His heart was wandering somewhere else. Maybe not fully, maybe not yet, but it was enough to tell me I wasn't his young anymore. Loneliness is a strange thing. You can live in a house full of people and still feel completely alone. I would sit at the kitchen table after Daniel went to bed, staring at the empty chair across from me. I remembered when that chair was filled with laughter, with conversations that stretched into the night. Now it was just wood and silence. Sometimes I caught myself whispering to that empty chair, as if the old Ethan were still sitting there. "Do you remember when you said you'd never stop loving me? Do you remember when you said I was your forever?" Of course, the chair never answered, and neither did he. The days turned into months, and the little cuts kept coming. At a family gathering, he said loudly, "Julia, you don't understand these things. You're old-fashioned." Everyone laughed. I smiled, but inside, I bled. At a dinner with friends, when someone asked him why he didn't travel more, he said, "Well, I'm married. My wife doesn't like change. She's more settled." He said it with a shrug, as if I were the chain holding him down. Each comment was small enough to pass as casual, but together, they built a wall between us. I wondered, when did I become his embarrassment? I didn't shout at him. I didn't fight. That wasn't who I was. I was raised to believe in quiet dignity, in holding your head high even when your heart was breaking. But something inside me began to shift. I realized that my silence had given him permission, my patience had made him careless, my loyalty had made him forget my worth. And so, in the stillness of those nights, while sitting alone in my kitchen, I began to form a quiet resolve. I didn't know yet what I would do, but I knew this: I would not let his words define me. I would not let his laughter at my expense be the end of my story. Then came another evening, one that stays in my memory like a scar. We were invited to his colleague's house for dinner. The place was beautiful. Polished floors, soft lights, walls decorated with expensive art. I wore a simple dress, the best I had. I wanted to look nice for him. I wanted, foolishly, to remind him of the woman he once loved. But when we arrived, I saw the way his eyes lit up at the sight of his colleague's young wife. She was graceful, elegant, only in her 20s. He spent most of the evening talking to her, laughing at her jokes, admiring every word. I sat quietly, smiling politely, sipping water while everyone else sipped wine. No one noticed the woman sitting in the corner except when they needed someone to pass the bread. On the way home, I asked him softly, "Did you have a good time?" He smirked. Of course! It was nice to talk to someone lively for a change. Lively? That was the word he used. I was not lively. I was dull. I was too old. I turned my face to the window and let the darkness outside hide my tears. In the middle of all this pain, Daniel was my anchor. He was growing fast, full of questions, full of life. He didn't see the cracks in our marriage the way I did, but sometimes his innocent words pierced deeper than Ethan's. One night, while tucking him into bed, he asked, "Mom, why don't you and Dad hold hands anymore?" I froze, my heart aching. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Sometimes grown-ups forget, but it doesn't mean they don't care." I wanted to believe that. I wanted him to believe that, because the truce was too heavy for his little heart. One afternoon, I visited my old friend, Maria. She had known me since childhood, long before Ethan. She looked at me carefully as I sipped tea in her kitchen. "Julia," she said softly, "you've lost your spark." I tried to smile. "I'm just tired." She shook her head. "No, it's more than that. You've been carrying too much alone. You used to laugh so freely. Where is that girl?" Her words stayed with me. Where was that girl? The one that Ethan had fallen in love with, the one who danced at weddings, who believed in forever, who thought love could conquer anything? I realized I had buried her under years of sacrifice and silence. It was then that I began to think not just of surviving this marriage, but of teaching Ethan something he would never forget. Not with anger, not with shouting. That wasn't who I was. I was raised to believe in quiet dignity, in holding your head high even when your heart was breaking. But something inside me began to shift. I realized that my silence had given him permission, my patience had made him careless, my loyalty had made him forget my worth. And so, in the stillness of those nights, while sitting alone in my kitchen, I began to form a quiet resolve. I didn't know yet what I would do, but I knew this. I would not let his words define me. I would not let his laughter at my expense be the end of my story. Then came another evening, one that stays in my memory like a scar. We were invited to his colleague's house for dinner. The place was beautiful. Polished floors, soft lights, walls decorated with expensive art. I wore a simple dress, the best I had. I wanted to look nice for him. I wanted, foolishly, to remind him of the woman he once loved. But when we arrived, I saw the way his eyes lit up at the sight of his colleague's young wife. She was graceful, elegant, only in her 20s. He spent most of the evening talking to her, laughing at her jokes, admiring every word. I sat quietly, smiling politely, sipping water while everyone else sipped wine. No one noticed the woman sitting in the corner except when they needed someone to pass the bread. On the way home, I asked him softly, "Did you have a good time?" He smirked. "Of course! It was nice to..."
There's a silence in marriage that is peaceful. The kind when you sit together without speaking, but your hearts are connected. And then there's a silence that is hollow, heavy, filled with unspoken words and unshared feelings. Ours was the second kind. Every evening I felt it. The gap between us grew wider. He sat with his phone or laptop. I sat across the room, invisible. We lived under the same roof, but not in the same world. And then, one evening, the silence broke in a way I could never forget. It was late. Ethan had gone to take a shower. His phone buzzed on the table. Normally, I never touched it. I believed in trust. But that night, something inside me told me to look. My hands trembled as I picked it up. A message flashed across the screen. "Last night was wonderful. I can't stop thinking about you." My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled quickly, my eyes scanning the words. There they were, long conversations, late-night promises, little hearts and kisses. He was meeting someone, a woman. Not just words, not just jokes, but moments, stolen moments he was sharing with her instead of me. The shower ran in the background as I stood there, frozen, my whole world crashing silently. When he came out, towel draped around his shoulders, I was still sitting there,
his phone in my hands. He stopped, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing with my phone?" he asked sharply. I looked at him. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Who is she?" For a moment, he tried to play dumb. "What are you talking about?" But the evidence was in my hands. I showed him the messages. His face went pale, then angry. "You had no right to go through my phone," he snapped. I almost laughed. No right? After giving him my life, my love, my youth, I had no right? I'm your wife, Ethan. I had every right to know who my husband really is. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg. He just looked away and muttered, "You wouldn't understand. We've changed." That was it. That was his excuse. We've changed. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry in front of him. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to his steady breathing beside me. I wondered how he could sleep so peacefully after breaking me in half. I thought about the girl he was seeing. Was she younger, prettier, livelier? Did she make him feel like the man he wanted to be? And then I thought about myself, the woman who had stood beside him through every hardship, who had cooked his meals, folded his clothes, raised his son, and given him the best years of her life. And for what? To be replaced? To be laughed at? To be called too old? The next morning, I forced myself to smile for Daniel. He was eating his cereal, swinging his little legs under the table. He looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, are you okay?" I paused. Children see more than we realize. I stroked his hair and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, Mommy's fine." But inside, I wasn't fine. Inside, I was a storm. And as I looked into my son's innocent eyes, I knew I couldn't let him grow up thinking this was love, thinking this was how a husband should treat a wife, thinking it was normal for a woman to give everything and receive nothing. I had to change something, not just for me, but for him. That day, I made a decision. I wouldn't leave in anger. I wouldn't destroy myself for his mistakes, but I also wouldn't continue being invisible. If he thought I was too old, too dull, too settled, then I would show him exactly what it meant to lose the woman he had taken for granted. Not by begging, not by shouting, but by rising, by finding myself again, by teaching him a lesson he would never forget. I started small. I joined a book club at the local library. Every Tuesday evening, I sat with women who shared stories, who laughed, who reminded me what it felt like to be seen. I began walking in the mornings, sometimes with Daniel, sometimes alone. I felt the sun on my skin, the breeze in my hair. I felt alive in ways I hadn't in years. I went shopping for myself, not for groceries, not for the house, for me. I bought a dress that made me feel beautiful, even if no one else said it. I cut my hair, not for him, but for me. Each step was like breathing again after being underwater for too long. At first, Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy with his phone, his work, his meetings. But slowly, he began to look at me differently. One evening, as I walked out in my new dress, he paused. "You're going somewhere?" "Yes," I said simply. "Book club." He frowned. "Since when do you go to book clubs?" "Since now," I answered softly, without explanation. He didn't say much, but I saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He wasn't used to me doing things for myself. He wasn't used to me choosing me. And that was only the beginning. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself. The lines were still there. The years were still there. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't see too old. I saw a woman who had survived heartbreak, who had carried a family, who had been wounded but not destroyed. I whispered to my reflection, "You are not too old. You are enough." And slowly, I began to believe it. The real turning point came a few weeks later. Ethan came home late. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He walked in casually as if nothing was wrong. But this time, I didn't stay silent. "Ethan," I said quietly, meeting his eyes, "does she make you happy?" He froze, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Does she make you happy?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence was louder than any answer. And in that silence, I found my strength. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "One day, Ethan, you're going to realize what you lost. And when that day comes, it will be too late." I walked away, leaving him standing there, speechless. For once, he was the one who didn't have the last word. That night, I lay awake again, but this time, I didn't feel broken. I felt powerful. Because the turning point wasn't about him. It wasn't about what he did or didn't do. It was about me. It was about finally choosing myself after years of choosing everyone else. And that choice was the beginning of the lesson I would teach him.
Life began to change for me in ways I never expected. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, slowly. Every morning I woke up with a little more strength. Instead of waiting for Ethan's attention, I gave attention to myself. Instead of searching for his love, I poured love into my son, into my friends, into the small joys that had always been there but I had forgotten. I started journaling. Every night before bed, I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for. Sometimes it was something small, like the smell of coffee in the morning or the sound of rain against the window. Sometimes it was bigger, like Daniel's laughter or the way the sun looked as it set over the park. Gratitude became my secret medicine. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something to hold on to that was mine alone. The more I grew, the less he recognized me. One evening, I was leaving for my walk when Ethan looked up from his phone and asked, "Where are you going?" I smiled gently. "Out?" "Out where?" he pressed. "Just out," I replied, slipping on my shoes. I didn't owe him an explanation anymore. He frowned. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't wait for permission, the one who didn't beg for his attention. I could feel his unease. He had grown comfortable in the belief that I needed him, that I had nowhere else to go. But now, he wasn't so sure. One weekend, we attended another gathering with his colleagues. I almost didn't want to go, but something inside me said go. Show up, not for him, but for you. I wore a simple but elegant dress. I didn't try to look younger. I didn't try to compete. I just chose something that made me feel comfortable, confident, alive. When we arrived, people noticed. Compliments came from women and men alike. "Ethan, you look beautiful tonight. There's something different about you. You're glowing." I smiled graciously, thanking them, but inside, I felt something powerful. I was visible again. Not because of him, not because of youth, but because of me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ethan watching. His smile was forced. His laughter with others sounded hollow. For the first time, he wasn't the center of attention. For the first time, I was. After that evening, I noticed his behavior shift in small ways. He came home earlier some nights. He asked where I was going, who I was meeting. He even tried to make small talk at dinner. But it felt different now. It wasn't love. It was insecurity. I could see it in his eyes, the fear of losing control, the fear of realizing he had underestimated me. I didn't lash out. I didn't throw his betrayal in his face every day. I didn't waste my energy proving his wrongs. Instead, I kept building myself. I took a cooking class with Maria, my childhood friend. We laughed like schoolgirls trying new recipes and making mistakes. For the first time in years, I felt joy without guilt. I started volunteering at the community center, helping children with reading. Their little eyes lit up when they understood a new word. Their hugs reminded me that love exists in so many forms.
Every day, I felt myself growing stronger. Every day, the woman who had once been buried under sacrifice was returning to life. Ethan didn't ignore it. He noticed. One evening, as I set the table, he said, "You've been different lately." I smiled softly. "Have I?" "Yes," he muttered. "You're always busy. You don't wait for me anymore." I looked at him calmly. "I stopped waiting, Ethan. Life is too short to wait for someone who doesn't see you." He didn't answer. He just stared, his fork resting in his hand, his eyes unsure. That was the moment I knew my lesson was working. Weeks later, the confrontation finally came. We were sitting in the living room, Daniel asleep upstairs. Ethan cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Julia, are you seeing someone?" The question almost made me laugh. After all his betrayals, after all his wandering eyes and secret messages, he was the one asking me this. I shook my head calmly. "No, Ethan, I don't need someone else to feel alive. I just needed to remember myself." He looked at me confused. "But you're different. You're stronger." "Yes," I said softly, "because I finally realized I don't have to live in the shadow of being too old. I am exactly who I am, and that's enough." His eyes softened for a moment. "Julia, but I held up my hand. Don't say words you don't mean. You had me, Ethan. You had all of me. And you treated me like I was less. That's something you'll have to live with." After that night, something in him shifted too. He stopped going out as often. The late-night calls became fewer. He lingered around me more, as if hoping to catch some of the warmth that he had once ignored. But the truth is, something in me had changed permanently. I no longer longed for his approval. I no longer begged for his love. I had found something stronger, self-respect. And once a woman finds that, she can never go back. The lesson wasn't in leaving. The lesson wasn't in shouting. The lesson was in showing him that I could rise without him, that his words no longer defined me, that his betrayal no longer controlled me. Every day, he watched me grow stronger. Every day, he saw me smile without him. Every day, he realized I didn't need him to survive. That was the lesson, and it burned deeper than any argument ever could. One night, as I tucked Daniel into bed, he smiled up at me and said, "Mom, you're happy again." Tears filled my eyes, but they were gentle tears this time. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm happy because I remembered who I am." And in that moment, I knew my son was learning the real lesson too. That love is not about control. That respect is the foundation of family. That women are not defined by age, but by strength. The cracks in our marriage didn't magically disappear. The scars were still there, but I was no longer broken. I was no longer invisible. Ethan saw it every day, in my calm eyes, in my steady smile, in the quiet dignity I carried. He had thought I was too old. He had thought I was weak, but he learned the truth in the hardest way. The strongest woman is the one who rises after being forgotten. And the sharpest lesson is not in anger, but in quiet strength.
Subscribe my channel for more interesting videos like this.